All right. Thank you everyone for being so patient. Good evening and welcome to Congressman Chuy Garcia's Show Me the Money Facebook Live.
Gracias a todos por tener tanta paciencia y le damos la bienvenida al representante Chuy García para hablar acerca del impacto económico y también recursos para que todos puedan recibir.
Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight.
Gracias por tomar el tiempo con nosotros. Primero quiero explicar el formato y luego volvemos con el representante Chuy García.
Muéstrame el dinero del congresista Chuy Garcia en Facebook Live. Este es un evento sobre lo que tienes que saber esta temporada de impuestos, sobre los cheques de estímulo económico, entre otros temas de tu interés. Mi nombre es David García y estaré moderando el evento de hoy. Gracias por estar con nosotros esta noche. En un momento pasaré al congresista Jesús García, pero primero quiero explicarles el formato del evento. This event will be in English, but for those folks joining the call who need Spanish translation, there's an option for you. I will now explain this in Spanish. Si necesita traducción al español, por favor, haga clic en el botón que dice Interpretation abajo en su pantalla. Debe de ser la última opción y hay un dibujo de un mundo encima del texto. Una vez que haga clic, tendrá una lista de opciones de idioma. Seleccione español. Y listo. Ahora puede escuchar el evento en español. If you would like to ask a question, please look for the box labeled Q&A, and a staff person will take your question and put it into the queue for the panelists to answer.
Si quiere hacer una pregunta, por favor, haga su comentario en el chat. Una pregunta por persona, ponga su nombre y su vecindario, de dónde es todo lo que tiene que hacer.
We would like to stay in touch and provide you with updates moving forward via our newsletters. Please visit our website at chuygarcia.house.gov. Again, that's CHUYGARCIA.HOUSE.gov. And now I'm going to turn it over to Congressman Chuy Garcia. Congressman, I believe you're muted. Congressman, can you hear me? I believe you're muted, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, David, for that introduction, and thanks to our interpreter as well. Thanks to everyone this evening for joining this conversation, very important and timely conversation with local taxpayer advocate and liaison from the Internal Revenue Service. Working class districts like the one I represent in Congress have been hit especially hard by the pandemic. Latino and Black communities have suffered disproportionately during the pandemic. So I've been fighting to make sure that we get badly needed relief, including checks for families, including immigrant mixed status families, economic assistance for renters, and additional funds for our cities, counties, and school districts. I'm proud of what the American Rescue Plan offers families in our district, and we're here to talk about some of those things in detail with the experts. First, let's go over direct payments. The CARES Act, which we passed a year ago, included payments of up to $1,200. The relief bill that we passed in December included payments up to $600. And the American Rescue Plan, the most recent action taken by Congress and signed by the president, included $1,400 in direct relief for each adult and child in your family. The relief will begin to phase out for adults who make more than $75,000 a year, or $150,000 for couples. That means that a family of four earning below $150,000 a year should get $5,600 in cash. And unlike the CARES Act, mixed status families are eligible for this badly needed relief. I worked with my colleagues in the House and Senate to make this happen, and I led a letter with more than 30 other members of Congress urging the IRS to roll out tools to help mixed status families get their money. Now, let's turn to the child tax credit. The American Rescue Plan includes an urgently needed expansion of the child tax credit program for 2021. In addition to the direct payments I just described, typically, parents who use the child tax credit get $2,000 per child. This year, the benefit is $3,000 per child between the ages of 6 and 17, and $3,600 for children under 6. And instead of paying out the whole benefit next year after filing your 2021 taxes, the IRS plans to pay out half the benefit this year and half the benefit the following year. We'll talk in more detail with our guests from the IRS about how they plan to roll this out. But no matter what, this program will cut child poverty almost in half this year and cut overall poverty in this country by nearly a third. It's a huge win for working class families in communities like ours. And finally, I'm proud to have focused on tenants throughout this pandemic. And I'm glad that the American Rescue Plan included more than $20 billion in additional emergency rental assistance. It also includes more than $10 billion in new funds to help struggling homeowners make mortgage and utility payments. So I'll close there and say that I'm proud of what we've accomplished with the American Rescue Plan. I think this is one of the most important pieces of legislation to pass Congress in more than a decade. But I know it's only the beginning. It's a sign that bigger and better things are coming for us. And I'll keep working with my colleagues in the House and the Senate and the White House to provide for our community. Now, I'll turn it over to our experts from the IRS and Tax Advocate. So tonight, I want to thank our guests. I'm joined by Susan Gaines. She is a district liaison for the IRS and assists with local IRS inquiries from taxpayers, businesses, and organizations. And Andrew J. Van Singel, he's the local taxpayer advocate. He provides additional support to constituents attempting to address IRS-related matters. So thank you for joining me. Our panelists will now go over some timely updates, information you should have. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat if you are on the Zoom, or post a comment below on Facebook Live. Now we will take, after their presentation, we will take questions from you. Thank you so much. Please proceed.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with your constituents this afternoon. It's tax time, and I want to spend a few minutes going over what you need to know for tax time, including some of the items that the Congressman mentioned a few minutes ago. So on the screen, you'll see a roadmap of the things that I'm going to be discussing this evening. I'll talk about some tax filing tips, where to get help filing your tax return, go over some IRS services and online tools that are available for you. I'll briefly go over those first and second round economic impact payments or stimulus checks, the 2020 recovery rebate credit, the third round, this most recent round of economic impact payments. I also want to make sure you know about an untaxable portion of unemployment compensation that you may have received. And then I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Van Singel to talk about the Taxpayer Advocate Service for a few minutes before we go into the question and answer session. Now, I know in addition to these topics, the child tax credit and the new expansion of that child tax credit and the ability to get advanced payments of that credit is a hot topic as well. However, the IRS has not yet issued guidance on those payments, so I won't be able to address questions on those tonight. But maybe later this spring or early summer, we can come back and talk a little bit about those some more. So with that, I'm going to get started with tax filing tips. So the IRS began processing 2020 tax returns earlier this year. When you get ready to file, we want to ask you to make sure that you file a complete and accurate tax return. And we highly recommend that you do this by filing electronically. That will help avoid any refund delays. Not only is electronic filing the fastest and safest way, it's also the most accurate way to file a tax return. E-filed returns have fewer errors, which means fewer delays. And be sure that you choose to get your tax refund electronically by requesting direct deposit. Filing electronically and choosing direct deposit remains the fastest and safest way to file that accurate tax return and to receive your refund. And speaking of refunds, most refunds are issued by the IRS in less than 21 days, although some tax returns do take a little bit longer. Some of the reasons it could take longer is if there was an error on your tax return, or your tax return was incomplete, you didn't include everything that you should have. Maybe you've been affected by identity theft or fraud, or perhaps you claimed the earned income tax credit or the additional child tax credit and you based your claim on your 2019 tax return rather than your 2020. Those are taking a little bit longer to process. Or if you claim the 2020 recovery rebate credit and the IRS needs to verify whether or not you received any of the first two stimulus payments, which we'll talk about more in a few minutes. Another big thing that causes delays is if you purchased health insurance through the marketplace and you failed to reconcile that insurance, that premium tax credit that you received to help pay for that insurance. You have to reconcile that on your tax return each year. So that could hold it up. And sometimes we just need to look at it a little bit if additional information is returned. And the Where's My Refund tool on irs.gov remains the best source for information on the status of your refund. Now, refund information is generally available within 24 hours after the IRS acknowledges receipt of your electronically filed tax return on that Where's My Refund tool on irs.gov. And I wouldn't be an IRS employee if I didn't go to the other side of that, because the opposite of getting a refund is when you owe taxes. So the IRS extended the deadline this year to file taxes. Instead of having to file by April 15th, you now have till May 17th to file. And you should file your tax return by May 17th, even if you owe and you can't full pay. If you think you're going to have trouble paying the bill, don't panic. File your tax return, even if you're unable to pay in full, but pay as much as you can to avoid any interest or penalties. Filing timely is especially important because the late filing penalty and the late payment penalty on unpaid taxes can add up quickly. Now, the IRS does offer several payment options. You can go to irs.gov/payments and you can ask for a short-term extension of time to pay, or ask for a longer-term payment plan, or you can even request an offer in compromise, which is where the IRS may settle for less than the full amount owed. And if you find yourself in a dire financial situation and you just can't afford to pay anything, you can ask the IRS to temporarily delay the collection of those taxes. So all of this information is available on irs.gov/payments. Now, something else I wanted to make sure that I mentioned about tax time is, for the first time ever, the two main tax forms, the Form 1040 or the 1040 SR that's available for seniors, those forms are now available in Spanish. In addition, the IRS has created a new Schedule LEP for limited English proficiency. You can ask by submitting this form that if the IRS needs to communicate with you, that they communicate with you in a language of your choice. That form offers 20 different language preferences. So if English is not your first language, you can select on the Schedule LEP for the IRS to communicate you within a language that's easier for you to understand. Now, I've talked about filing your taxes, but where can you get help filing your taxes? That's an important question that I'm asked often. If you're computer savvy or you're good with a computer, you have internet access, maybe you're not good with a computer, but you know a teenager who are excellent with all things technology, grab a teenager to help you. But the IRS offers a free file site. So you can go to the IRS website and click on free file. And if your income's below $72,000, you can choose one of our free file partners to electronically file your 2020 tax return for free. Or maybe you need more in-person assistance. We do have some free sites out there. There are volunteer income tax return sites. These are IRS trained volunteers that will help you do your tax return for free. You can see on the screen, there's a phone number you can call or access the locator tool on the IRS website to find a place near you that you can get assistance doing your tax return if your income's less than $57,000. Or maybe your tax return is more complex. Maybe you have a business. You may want to look at our Choosing a Tax Professional tool available on the IRS website. There's various types of tax return preparers, including certified public accountants, CPAs. There's enrolled agents, there's attorneys, and there's many others who do not have a professional credential, but they're very skilled in tax return preparation. And you expect your tax return preparer to be skilled in tax return preparation and to accurately file your income tax return. You're trusting this tax return preparer with your most personal information. They know about your marriage, your income, your children, everyone's social security number, their ITIN, their birth dates. They know all the details of your financial life. So you want to make sure that you choose the right tax return preparer. Now, most tax return preparers are very professional and provide outstanding service. However, each year, many individuals are hurt financially because they choose the wrong tax return preparer. You want to be sure that you check out our tips for choosing a tax return preparer on that website I just mentioned, Choose a Tax Pro. And also, I put a link here to a news article of ours to help you know how to avoid unethical ghost return preparers. Now, a ghost return preparer is someone you pay to do your taxes, but they refuse to sign your tax return as that paid preparer. These unscrupulous ghost preparers will print the tax return and tell you just sign it and mail it to the IRS. Or they may actually electronically file the tax return for you, but they refuse to digitally sign it as that paid tax return preparer. Now, by law, anyone that prepares a tax return for a fee or assists in preparing your tax return and charges you for it must have what we call a PTIN. That PTIN is a practitioner tax identification number. And in addition to signing your tax return, these paid preparers must include their PTIN on your return. If you pay someone to do your tax return and they don't sign it, that is a red flag that they may be looking to make a fast buck by promising a big refund or charging fees based on the size of the refund. These ghost tax return preparers could also require that you pay them in cash only, and they don't provide you a receipt. Or they could be inventing income to boost the amount of your tax credits that you qualify for. They could claim face deductions to boost the size of your refund. And sometimes they even direct deposit the refund into their bank account, not yours. So we just urge you to be very careful when you choose your tax return preparer and use some of the tools that I have here on the screen available to help you choose the appropriate tax return preparer for your situation. Now, the IRS also has a variety of other services and online tools available on the website, www.irs.gov. Our website has around-the-clock information available, and it's actually the fastest way to get assistance. Millions of people use our website to help file their taxes, to get information about their tax account, and to get answers to tax questions. So the first one I want to talk about is the online account. This online account system is a secure online system that allows you to access your individual tax account. On this site, you can see if you owe taxes, how much you owe, as that balance is current as of each day. You can see about any payments you've made, or if you scheduled a payment, you can see that. You can see information from your most recent tax return, or if you have a payment plan, you can see the details of that. You can get copies of notices that the IRS have sent you. And if you received one of the first 2 economic impact payments, you'll be able to see that on your tax account as well. You can use that online account tool to set up a payment plan or to get copies of previous tax returns, tax transcripts. Now, to obtain access to your online account, you do have to go through a secure access process. There's more information on that online account page about the secure access platform. Now, another tool available on our website is the Interactive Tax Law Assistant. This is a tool that provides you answers to several tax law questions specific to your individual circumstances. Based on your input, this tool can help you determine things such as, do I even have to file a tax return? Or, what's my filing status? Can I claim head of household? Can I claim my mother or my brother as a dependent? Is this type of income that I receive taxable? Am I eligible to claim the earned income credit or the child tax credit? And there's more. Can I deduct expenses? What if I have a business? Lots more. So you can use the search feature on that page, or there's a category list on the page. And then, excuse me, a couple other in the right direction and provide you with our telephone assistance phone numbers. There's also an online services guide that will link you to some of the sites that I've already mentioned today and other IRS services. And then, as I mentioned, the Where's My Refund tool. You probably already know where this is if you've already looked for a refund before, but the tool is updated once a day, so there's no need to check back more often. Now I want to move on and talk about the stimulus payments for a few minutes. As the Congressman mentioned, the stimulus payments started coming out based on the CARES Act last year. It authorized the first round of economic impact payments. These payments were based on either a 2018 or a 2019 tax year return, or if you didn't file a tax return, it was based on possibly the fact that you received Social Security or veterans benefits or railroad retirement benefits, or maybe you use that non-filer tool that the IRS had available last year to qualify, help you get your information in the system to show you qualified for the payment. The first payment was up to $1,200 or $2,400 if you filed joint with a spouse, plus $500 for any qualifying children under the age of 17. The second payment was for up to $600, $1,200 if you file jointly with your spouse, plus up to $600 for any qualifying children under 17. And if you didn't get the first or second payment, or you received less than the full amounts, you may qualify for the 2020 recovery rebate credit, but you must file a tax return to claim the credit. Now, the 2020 recovery rebate credit had similar eligibility requirements, except that those eligibility requirements were based on your 2020 tax return rather than your 2018 or 2019 return. So a change in your income or your circumstances could make a person eligible for the recovery rebate credit. For example, some people may have received less than the full amount because their income was too high in 2018 or 2019. So now they can claim the recovery rebate credit for 2020 based on their 2020 income if they otherwise qualify. Or if a person was claimed as a dependent on someone else's tax return in 2018 or 2019, but they cannot be claimed as a dependent on the 2020 tax return, they may now be eligible for that 2020 recovery rebate credit. Also, under a new law enacted in December, the one that authorized the second round of payments, if a married couple filing a joint return, that they may be eligible for a partial credit when only one spouse had a Social Security number valid for employment. So if you and your spouse did not receive one or both economic impact payments because one of you did not have a Social Security number valid for employment, then you should file a tax return and claim the 2020 recovery rebate credit if you're otherwise eligible. And if anyone is eligible and didn't receive the full amount of the first or second payments, then they have to file, I've said this before, you have to file a 2020 tax return to claim that credit. There's more information about the recovery rebate credit on irs.gov/RRC. And just as a reminder, a lot of the websites on irs.gov are translated to Spanish. So any website you go to, you can just click at the top of the screen. It says English, click on that. You can choose Spanish to get any of this information in Spanish as well. Now let me talk about the third economic impact payments. So following approval of the American Rescue Plan Act, the third round of payments began reaching Americans last month in March. So generally, if you're a U.S. citizen or a U.S. resident alien and you're eligible for up to $1,400 or $2,800 for married filing jointly, plus $1,400 for each qualifying dependent. And if you and or your spouse filing a joint return aren't a dependent of another taxpayer for tax year 2020. Also, most people have to have a valid Social Security number, but I'll talk about some exceptions later. And your adjusted gross income cannot be above the dollar amounts that the Congressman stated earlier. Now, if you file jointly with your spouse and only one of you has a valid SSN, then you'll receive up to $1,400 for the spouse with a valid SSN and $1,400 for each qualifying dependent claimed on your tax return with a valid SSN or adoption tax ID number. However, if neither spouse has a valid SSN, then you can still receive up to $1,400 for each qualifying dependent with a valid SSN or adoption tax ID number. There's also an exception, for all three of the economic impact payments, and that's if either spouse is an active duty member of the United States Armed Forces at any time during the tax year, then only one spouse would have to have a valid Social Security number in order to receive the payments for themselves plus their qualifying dependents. Also, unlike the first two payments, the dependent portion of the stimulus, this third stimulus payment, is not restricted to children under 17. So eligible families will get a payment based on all of their qualifying dependents claimed on their tax return. And this could include an older relative, like a parent or a college student, or maybe an adult child that has disabilities. No action is needed by most individuals to receive their economic impact payments. These are going to be automatic, the same as they were rolled out with the first and second payments. And you can use the IRS's Get My Payment tool. It's the first big box on irs.gov. That tool is available in English and Spanish. And you can use that tool to check and see when your payment will be issued. Now, the information the IRS uses to determine who qualifies for these payments is whether or not the first we will use a 2020 tax return. If you haven't filed yet or your 2020 tax return hasn't been processed, we'll use your 2019 tax return. Or if you didn't file a 2019, we'll use information if you use that non-filers portal. Also, federal benefit recipients. So if you were on the books with Social Security or VA, veterans benefits, or railroad retirement by December 31st, we'll use that information. If you don't fall into one of the categories above, then you're going to want to file a 2020 tax return in order to receive that third economic impact payment and or the equivalent of the first two payments via the 2020 recovery rebate credit. So you have to file a tax return or be a Social Security, VA, or railroad retirement recipient as of December 31st in order for the IRS to know you qualify for these economic impact payments. Now, there's more information about all of these payments on irs.gov/EIP for economic impact payment. You can check your status, as I mentioned, and view some of our frequently asked questions on the irs.gov/getmypayment. And for all other COVID-related tax relief, you can go to irs.gov/coronavirus for more information. Now, one more topic before I turn it over to Andrew to talk about the Taxpayer Advocate Service. I just want to make sure that people are aware that part of the American Rescue Plan Act provided for an exclusion of up to $10,200 of unemployment compensation received in 2020. So the act passed on March 11th, and it excluded from income the $10,200 of unemployment, which means you don't have to pay any tax on that unemployment compensation up to the $10,200 mark. And if you're married, filing jointly with your spouse, each spouse that received unemployment compensation doesn't have to pay tax on up to $10,200. As long as your income is under $150,000, you'll qualify for this exemption. Amounts over the $10,200 are still taxable. And if you've already filed your tax return for 2020 and included all of your unemployment on your tax return, you do not need to file a corrected tax return or an amended tax return. The IRS will correct your tax return and issue any applicable refund that you're due. And again, for more information on this and other coronavirus relief, you can go to irs.gov/coronavirus. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Van Singel to talk about the Taxpayer Advocate Service.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan, and Congressman Garcia. Thank you for having us here to present this very important information. So I just have a couple of minutes that I'm going to talk about Taxpayer Advocate, and that's going to give us more time so we can focus on the question and answer portion of it. But just to give you a broad overview, Taxpayer Advocate is an independent organization within the IRS that helps protect taxpayer rights. We can offer you help if you are having a tax problem that's causing financial difficulty, or if you've tried to resolve the issue on your own and have been unsuccessful, or if you believe that an IRS system, process, or procedure just isn't working the way that it is intended to work. TAS, as we call it, Taxpayer Advocate Service, TAS, we help all taxpayers. So it can be a single parent, a college student, a family, a library, a hospital, a major corporation, or a small business. So we help anyone, including the representatives. So if they already have retained an attorney or an accountant to help them, we can help them, and our services are free. And at Taxpayer Advocate, we typically work on individual issues, but we also help with systemic advocacy. So that is looking at more big picture issues that are impacting more than one taxpayer. And we advocate for change within how the IRS does its business or how the laws are written. Before coming to Taxpayer Advocate, we ask that the taxpayers try to resolve the issue on their own. We ask that, call the IRS or respond faxing a letter back to them or writing a letter back to them. But if you're still unsuccessful, then you can come to TAS and we'll be happy to assist you. If we take your case, you're going to have a case assignment, one individual who's going to be with you every step of the way. So if you've tried to resolve issues with the IRS, you'll notice that every time you call, you're talking to a different person every single time. And that's very frustrating because you have to feel like you have to tell the story every time. And so when you get a case at TAS, that one person is going to be with you from start to finish. They know how the IRS works and they're going to stay with you every step of the way until your case is resolved. In addition to providing direct assistance to taxpayers, TAS also has oversight over two other programs, which is the LITCs and TAP. And so briefly about both of these programs, the low-income taxpayer clinics are independent from the IRS and from Taxpayer Advocate, and these clinics are across the country. And there's, I believe, 5 low-income taxpayer clinics that are in the Chicago area. There's a couple that are downtown. There's one that's based in Elgin, and then there's one that's based in Wheaton, but a lot of them are statewide programs or they cover the entire 4th congressional district. Low-income taxpayer clinics can represent taxpayers with audits, exam, appeals, tax court, federal district court, all types of matters. They do everything except, for the most part, preparing income tax returns. There's a list of the low-income taxpayer clinics on our website, and there's also a publication 4134, which lists the clinics across the country. So if you have a friend or family member in another state that needs assistance, you can point them to that list of those clinics. TAP, on the other hand, is the Taxpayer Advocacy Panel. That's a federal advisory committee comprised of citizen volunteers across the country. They serve 3-year terms, and they go out and do outreach, listen to taxpayers, and find ways to improve the IRS. So there's kind of 2 ways you can interact with TAP. One is to make those recommendations or go onto the website and submit those recommendations, or to serve as a TAP member yourself. And those positions are listed on USA Jobs. And I believe right now the applications are open for that. And while we're talking about applications, I would be remiss to say, if I didn't mention that our office is actually hiring. And so be sure to go on USA Jobs. We don't hire often, and we're hiring a lot of people, which is very exciting. And a lot for us is like 12, but that's still a lot. And so check that out if you're interested in beginning a career with the IRS. Last, I would encourage you to check out TAS's website. We have a pretty decent social media presence, and we put a lot of information out daily. And so that's a great place to look for the most up-to-date information. A lot of times with social media, a lot of information is out there. Some of it is not entirely correct. So you can hear it straight from the agency, hear it from the IRS, and hear it from TAS. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. I don't know if we're on Snapchat or TikTok, but I can find out for the younger crowd. We also hold problem-solving events across the country. So sometimes we'll go to practitioner events or to libraries, and we'll, pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID, set up a table in which people can just walk up and get direct assistance from us. So I have a couple of other odds and ends that I wanted to get out, but I think those points will come through in the Q&A. So I'll turn it back to our host to kind of lead us through that portion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrew and Susan, for that valuable information you've shared with people on the call tonight, on the Facebook call. We have a couple of first questions that people are putting on the chat box. The first is, if you haven't worked in 2 years, do you qualify for any relief, and how do you go about making a claim?
unmute, had to find my unmute button. I apologize. So, yes, there are, there's not a work requirement that that's needed to qualify for the economic impact payments. So if you haven't worked and filed a tax return in the last 2 years, then you should file a tax return and claim the recovery rebate credit for 2020 as long as you're eligible. And as a reminder, to be eligible, you can't be claimed as a dependent by another taxpayer. And either you or your spouse would have a valid Social Security number, and you just file the tax return and claim the recovery rebate credit. And you can do that using Free File or going to one of our VITA sites to do it. And by filing that 2020 tax return and claiming the recovery rebate credit, that puts you in the queue or in the line to receive the third economic impact payment as well.
Okay, great. That's straightforward. I think David has a question.
Yes. All right. So a question came to the chat. What about the families that didn't receive any stimulus checks? Where can they call? And I'll go ahead and answer that one. If you haven't received any stimulus checks, we advise you to please reach out to our office. We'll go ahead and get in contact with you, and I myself will go ahead and speak with you, try to figure out what's going on, and do our best to assist you in the matter. My next question here, do people with ITIN numbers get stimulus checks?
Okay, sorry, having trouble with my mute button today, sorry. So people with ITIN numbers are not eligible for a stimulus check. However, with that said, if they're married to someone with a valid Social Security number, or if they're married to someone that's in active duty armed forces, active duty military, they can qualify that way for the person with a valid Social Security number, or if active duty, then both spouses would qualify. Also, if you have an ITIN, but maybe your child has a valid Social Security number, people with ITINs can get the third economic impact payment, the one coming out now, for their children that have valid Social Security numbers. So there are some situations where someone with an ITIN may receive a payment. Yes.
Okay, thank you. We received another question in the chat box. It reads, I'm receiving Social Security. If I'm receiving Social Security or veterans benefits, what do I have to do to access the EIP?
That's a good question. The IRS just got the information from Social Security. I believe it was the last week in March that gave the IRS the information that we needed in order to send the third economically going to start coming out tomorrow. The Veterans Affairs, the VA, the Veterans Affairs Administration, has provided the IRS with information, and we should be able to start sending those payments later this month. And more information will be announced on these payments when they're coming out on irs.gov. The best way to check is to use that Get My Payment tool. It will only provide a date once your payment is going to be issued.
Okay, thank you. We have another question in the box. What is the best way for non-filers to claim the third economic impact payment?
That one is going to be very similar to an earlier question. If you're a non-filer, that means you're probably not in the IRS system. So you would want to file a 2020 tax return and claim that 2020 recovery rebate credit to get the first two payments if you're eligible. And that will put you in line. Once the IRS processes that 2020 tax return, that'll put you in line to receive the third payment as well. So as long as you meet the eligibility requirements, all you need to do is file a tax return to get in the system, so the IRS knows to send you a payment.
Okay, so the filing is the trigger for those benefits, and we encourage people to heed that advice and get that filing done. One more question that just came through. Briefly, what is the look back rule and how does it benefit people or folks?
I'm a little unclear. I'm assuming that in referring to the look back rule, we're talking about for the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. And so if your income was more in 2019 than it was in 2020, you may want to use your 2019 income to qualify for an additional amount of earned income tax credit or child tax credit on your 2020 tax return. So that's an election that you would need to make, but you would only make that election if it qualifies you for a larger earned income tax credit or child tax credit. If you, when you do the math or you're using software or you're talking to your tax professional, if using that look back amount doesn't qualify you for more, then you wouldn't want to use it. You would want to go ahead and use your 2020 income information. Good question.
Very good one. For another question, for seniors, if they were not supposed to be claimed as a dependent, but were claimed, how do they resolve this?
If somebody claimed you as a dependent and they shouldn't, the first thing the IRS needs you to do is file a tax return for yourself and make sure you do not check the box that says someone can claim me as a dependent. So filing a tax return without that box check lets the IRS know that no one can claim you as a dependent. And the only way for the IRS to know whether or not someone should claim you as a dependent is through the audit process. So by filing that tax return, that would cause the IRS to look at both tax returns and ask questions: who should have claimed this person as a dependent? So you have to file a tax return to let us know. And Andrew, I think that you might have a little more that you can add to that.
Yeah, so when you, thank you. So when you file that tax return, essentially with a dependent, it's going to come down to, there's a lot of kind of complicated rules, but the very threshold level is, usually when we're talking dependents, we're talking about minor children. So generally if they're, I believe if they're under 19 or under 24, if they're a full-time college student and they live with you for at least half the year, and they're not supporting themselves, you should be able to claim them as a dependent. But we see this as a big, what we call a race to file problem. And you see a lot between couples that are divorced or separated. The dependents, the children, they're very valuable when it comes to the tax credits that are available. And so what you see is both individuals are going to file early on in the filing season. So you may have run into the situation where you go to file your return electronically, and then it rejects it. And it says somebody else claimed one of the social security numbers on the return. The IRS can't parse out what is legitimate if both are trying to file electronically at the same time. And so that's kind of what Susan said, is that the IRS is likely going to open up either one or both of those returns. And now the burden is going to be on the taxpayer to prove that they're entitled to claim that individual. And so that's why we always tell people, legitimate filers, to go out and file early on in the filing season so that nobody else can do any nefarious things to claim you or claim another individual. Back in 2008, the last time we saw stimulus payments going out, we uncovered a lot of identity theft because there were seniors who just weren't filing tax returns for years. And then all of a sudden they had to file a return, or they had to go interact with the IRS again. And lo and behold, they found out that somebody had been claiming them for the last decade. So there's many reasons to file a tax return. Getting the stimulus payments is a great reason to do that, but also to prevent identity theft. A lot of times that adjusted gross income on your tax return is going to be the benchmark for getting a home loan, an auto loan. Even if you're on Social Security or don't have a filing requirement, it may be in your best interest to file a tax return. And so just kind of on the bookend of that, I talked about e-filing. I think this year more than ever, it's very critical that if you interact with the IRS, that you try to do so electronically. So if you file a tax return, you're going to want to file electronically if you're able to. If you owe them money, you should look into being able to pay them electronically. If you get a notice, a lot of times there's a fax number. Those are e-faxes. So you may send a paper fax, but it comes to us electronically. The IRS has a significant backlog of paper returns and paper correspondence. And so this is the best way to get those responses, to get those payments, and to get those tax returns into the system and get them worked very quickly, because those are going to tend to go through more of an automated process, and you can greatly reduce or eliminate the risk of that information getting lost.
Thank you. And this is our final question, because I see that big clock in back of you. Andrew tells us it's coming on 7 p.m. So the last question is this. One spouse is a citizen and one is not. She may be undocumented. Are we eligible for the EIPs?
Yes, I talked about this a little bit earlier. So if one spouse has a Social Security number, a valid Social Security number, and the other spouse does not, the other spouse has an ITIN, then the spouse with the valid Social Security number will be able to go back and claim the recovery rebate credit on their 2020 tax return and receive the first two amounts of the economic impact payment as their 2020 recovery rebate credit, as long as they meet the other eligibility requirements, such as not being independent and their income under the 75,000 or 150,000 for a joint couple. Now, as far as the third economic impact payment, even if both parents have ITINs, they should still be receiving the third payment for their children that have Social Security numbers. Or if only one spouse has an ITIN and the other one has a Social Security number, they should still receive the payment for the spouse with the Social Security number. So that's a very good question. That was a change with the American Rescue Plan that allowed the dependents to still receive benefit of those funds.
Great.
Congressman, if I could just add, if I could
yes.
add one quick note there, kind of on an off topic, but this is one of the biggest issues that we see in our office, and this is causing a lot of hardship to taxpayers, is taxpayers are filing returns that are not 100% correct. And so the IRS kind of changed how they process returns in the last several years. And so if there's a mismatch between the income, the wages, or the withholding, those refunds are going to get hung up on the front end before that money goes out. So in years past, taxpayers could have done things like take their last paycheck and go to a preparer and say, here's my pay stub, can you do my taxes? 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, that's going to cause your return to get hung up in a program within the IRS that matches. And a lot of times taxpayers are filing returns where they omit a W-2 because they're still waiting on, they work 3 or 4 jobs, they're waiting for that last W-2 and they don't have it. And that's going to cause significant delays. We're talking at the bare minimum 11 to 16 weeks. So we really encourage taxpayers to wait until they get all their documentation, file it right the first time. If you have healthcare subsidy through the Affordable Care Act, you should be getting a 1095A. It is very, very critical that gets on your tax return. The department that is responsible for making those corrections, if you don't include your healthcare premium or your American Opportunity Credit or education credits, significantly backlogged. There's people who have filed returns last March and still do not have the refunds. So it's very, very critical to get it right the first time. That's the best piece of advice that I can give anyone that's filing a tax return. Don't guess, reach out to somebody, do some research if you have any questions. And as always, you can reach out to our office and we'd be happy to help taxpayers who are having hardships. Thanks again.
Great. Thank you both, Andrew and Susan, for joining us. They represent the IRS and they've shared some very important insight into how to handle these payment benefits and the future ones that families with children will be available for. We will be providing additional guidance once the IRS provides it, and we may ask our guests to join us again for conversations about that. This has been a hard year for our community. I understand that these benefits and programs can be complicated. So my staff and I will always be there to help you get through it. So you can call us at area code 773-342-0774 or 773-475-0833. And I promise that I'll keep working and fighting for families, for renters, for workers, and for small businesses on streets all over Chicagoland and in the halls of Congress. Thank you so much and good night.